Hello everyone, this is Carlos Garrido. I hope y'all are having a wonderful holiday weekend. I just finished watching a film called Don't Look Up. If you plan on watching the film, pause the video and go watch it and come watch this video afterwards because there will be spoilers. Not probably very good ones, but there will be spoilers. Um, so it's a film with some great actors. They got Leo, DiCaprio, who I really like, and they got some other actors that I appreciate. So a lot of A-list actors, and it's a movie that is a little bit progressive. It's a nice film. It gets the sentiments riled up, but I think that as Marxists and as Marxist-Leninists specifically, our job is to be critical, even of these things that pass as being progressive. So the setting of the movie quickly introduces us to a catastrophic problem. There's a meteor that's about to hit Earth in 6 months and 14 days. It is twice the size of the one that made the dinosaurs extinct. And if it hits Earth, it's a planet-destroying catastrophe. It would just kill all life. The scientists that find it, a PhD candidate, and the doctor that finds it, the professor, they take this information to the president, and the president is depicted as this Trump-like figure, anti-science, very focused on pro-felicity, on likes, on the game of politics, on what does good in the polls, what sort of scandals can help you move forward, which scandals are the ones that set you back. We know the game of politics, we know how it works. But she's painted as this Trump-like candidate that just pushes off the issue, has certain scientists within the White House say that it's not real, that the evidence is shady, that it's not that likely for the comet to hit. And then it gets to a point where they end up accepting it. And they set up a plan to launch nukes at the comet in order to have it deviate its course and not hit Earth. They're in the middle of doing it, and right when they shoot off, this tech billionaire comes in the room, who's one of the central sources for the funding of the candidate. He comes in the room, and out of nowhere the plan is stopped, and no one knows what happened until a few days after, where they have a meeting. The tech CEO shows up, and or the owner of the company shows up, and the guy says that, look, here's what we're going to do. This comet, after investigation, has these chemicals and these elements that are going to make us very rich, that can get us hundreds of trillions of dollars, and that can help with technology and this and that. So what we're going to do is set up this mechanism where we stop the comet, we break it up into pieces, and then we're able to take those smaller pieces and land them appropriately so that we can then mine the comet and make a shitload of money from it, right? So they exclude, obviously, other countries from participating in this excavation, even though it's a planet-destroying event. They push other countries away, and what ends up happening is that it's bullshit. They do the attempt, and it doesn't work. And right before that, there was an attempt by Russia and China and India to set up their own deviational project for the comet, and their station ends up getting bombed, right? So they don't say what it was, but it's obviously a comet that's going to bring hundreds of trillions of dollars for an American capitalist, and therefore, if it's deviated, that's hundreds of trillions of dollars that that specific American capitalist loses. Therefore, it's pretty obvious that it was the U.S. who bombed the attempt of Russia, India, and China to deviate the comet. So whatever, the only plan that ends up standing is the one from the capitalists. It ends up failing, and life on Earth is just bloop, done. Before that, what the billionaire ends up doing is that 2,000 of the richest people and of his friends, they end up going into a capsule that 22,000 years later ends up finding another planet, and they're still alive through these technologies, and they get off, and that's how the movie ends. Now, the movie is a metaphor for climate change and the sort of catastrophe that can be brought about not just to human life, but to planetary life in general because of climate change. And it brings attention to how it is that the leaders of specifically the most powerful country do not care about these issues, that they make these issues games of politics, and they don't take the science seriously. And ultimately, what they end up doing is prioritizing profit over planetary extinction. So it's very easy to look at this movie, and in some sense it would be true to say that this is a critique of capitalism, that this is a critique of a form of life which in its prioritization of profit has literally allowed planetary life to just go extinct. In some sense, that is correct. That is what capitalism is doing. Capitalist relations are allowing climate change to develop and literally not doing anything about it. If it's the Republican Party, they play around with saying that it's not real, or that it's not man-made or a result of human activity. If it's the Democratic Party, maybe it's even worse because they tell you that they care, but they don't end up doing anything substantially different. So although the movie tries to paint it as an issue of, just a Republican, both parties aren't really very much different when it comes to this issue. It's a government that's dominated by corporate interests, by the interests of capitalists that end up prioritizing profit over human and planetary life. So here we have a very clear metaphor, a very clear analogy for what's going on today with climate change. Now, why isn't this just a progressive movie with anti-capitalist sentiments and that's it? Well, for a few reasons, right? First one, let's analyze what the movie presents as the problem. The problem is a comet that came from a blown up star billions of years ago, and that with no control and with no source in human activity now presents human life and planetary life with this catastrophe, with this potential catastrophe. Here we have a problem. If we're going to sustain the analogy, and knowing Leo, who's always on social media talking about climate change and stuff, and was a big part of the process of the movie, he was the main character. The problem here is that the climate catastrophe that we have heading right towards us is not something that was just a cosmic event we had no control over. It's also not something, as certain eco-fascists and Malthusianists argue, it's also not something that's a result of just sheer humans. It's not just humans. It's not just overpopulation. It's not just, humans are killing the planet. There was a banners from Extinction Rebellion when the virus first came out, and people had to go back home, and certain rivers that didn't have their animals because they were just being crossed by humans, they regained their animals, and they started coming up with this myth that the humans are the virus. Humans are the virus. That eco-Malthusianism, that eco-fascism has to be rejected. Climate change is neither a human issue, and it's neither a cosmic, inevitable issue. It's an issue about concerning the relations that humans sustain with each other and with nature, with the planet. And that is what economics is. Economics is the study of the relations that humans sustain with each other and with the planet in order to meet the needs of a community. So what we have with climate change is not something that just popped out of nowhere for some cosmic, it was just some cosmic event we had no control over. It is the direct result of the last 150 years of capitalism, of industrial capitalism, and the last 70 or so years of what's called fossil capitalism, which has driven us into a new human stage, a new stage called the Anthropocene, a stage where human activity is making qualitative changes to the metabolisms of the planet and to the general workings of the planet. We're changing the climate qualitatively through human activity, through fossil capitalism. So there we have a problem that is very different than just a comet that presents itself out of nowhere as something that can potentially ruin our life, right? We have something that's grounded in what has been the dominant system globally for the last century. So it's a problem that has deeper roots than just a comet showing up, and roots that are related to human activity, specifically human economic activity. It's related to capitalism. Climate change is a problem of capitalism. It isn't a problem of just humans, and it isn't a cosmic contingent catastrophe. It's a problem of capitalism. Now let's look at the solution. First of all, I was very appreciative that they didn't use this movie to throw some weird jab at China or at Russia. There was another show that I had watched probably a year ago now. I forget what the name of the show was called, but it was a show that also had to do with outer space and NASA and stuff like that. And they were constantly painting China as the bad guys, the people that destroyed the American station on the moon, and it was just the complete embodiment of the propaganda war against China that we have seen roiling up over the last few years. This movie doesn't do that. It paints a really good picture of the roots of this fuckery coming from American capitalism, right? I would say that, you know, when they described the bombing of the deflection attempt that was that came about through the Russia-China-India alliance, that maybe is a bit, you know, underestimating the capacities that Russia and China have developed to stop those sorts of bombings. But whatever, there was no sleight of jabs against China or against Russia or against any of these other countries that in the media, as soon as we turn the TV on, we hear people and pundits blaming them for everything. The point about the solution, we touched on the problem. Now the differences we find in the solution in relationship to what the movie is supposed to be a metaphor of, so climate change. The differences in the solution is that the solution for the meteor crisis is just one event. It's just deflect the meteor. That's it. It takes no other change once that deflection is done. Everything goes back to business as usual. With climate change, that is not how the solution works. The solution is not just one thing you do. The solution, like the problem, has to be systemic. The problem of climate change is a systemic problem. It is a result of the system of capitalism. Its solution will also have to be systemic. It will have to consist of an uprooting, complete destruction of the forms of life that we have because of capitalism. We need to be able to restructure production according to human need so that we're not just wasting things while there's people going hungry and people without houses, and there's more houses than people that are homeless. These irrationalities that stem from capitalism, from capitalist production, from capitalist market distributions, these irrationalities that we have had over the last 2, 3, 4 centuries, they must be overturned. And the condition for the possibility of a successful dealing with climate change is socialism. You cannot deal with climate change without socialism. Today, all environmentalists should be socialists, and all socialists should be eco-socialists as well. They should concern themselves with the incoming climate catastrophe, because that's also an issue of class struggle. It isn't working class individuals who have brought us here. It isn't just general citizens, right? This is the bourgeois individualizing of the blame. You're all to blame, you know, just recycle and, you know, You're absolved of your guilt. It's almost like back in the day when the Pope would tell you, or the priest would tell you, just 3 Hail Marys for masturbating or some shit. Just recycle and you're good. That guilt that you have inside you, that we have put inside you for you being blameworthy for the climate catastrophe, just recycle and you're good. That's not what we're dealing with here. We need a systemic change because it's a system that puts a ruling class whose only concern is the accumulation of capital. It is that system which has put us in this condition, and so the solution is a systemic change. It's a movement towards socialism. So I think ecological concerns and socialism have to go hand in hand, and that's not something that we see in the movie. The movie is just boom, one event, deflect the meteor or the comet, and you're good. Climate change, no. Climate change is going to require class struggle. It's going to require the popular masses, the working class, and other classes in society that are also disadvantaged by the existing system. It's going to require them coming together, grabbing power, overturning this irrational system, basing themselves on a system of cooperation that meets human needs, that helps prioritize a form of qualitative human growth that's grounded in creating conditions for human flourishing and not just for making more shit, that redefines how we think of growth, so that growth is not just having more stuff, but having the right stuff that we need in order to grow as human beings in community and flourish together, both as individuals in community. That's what's needed, not just deflecting a meteor. Sorry, I don't usually do these movie or media reviews, but I think this case is important because some of the most successful ways capitalism works is through presenting an opposition that is not really an opposition, right? And this movie does a really good job at that. It presents itself as very critical of the existing way of things, of business as usual, of the government, of politicians, and even of capitalism. But it doesn't get to the root. It doesn't get to the root of the problem, and it doesn't get to the root of the solution because it's not critical enough. It doesn't ask, because the movie is a metaphor for climate change. It doesn't ask what is the condition for the possibility of an event like climate change, and what is the condition for the possibility of fixing that. And in this case, it means deterring some of the effects that we're bound to have and stopping it from getting worse. That's a critical question. That's what doing critical philosophy is. That's part of what Marxism encapsulates within its philosophy, the question of what is the condition for what's behind this, what is presupposed in this, right? So always be critical when you're fed these progressively singing liberal narratives. Not everything that presents itself as anti-capitalist is genuinely anti-capitalist. Capitalism has developed this great ability to have a controlled pocket of resistance within itself, to have a synthetic left-wing movement that it contains within itself, so that all dissenting energies go to those positions that ultimately have no strategy and the wrong analysis, and therefore cannot produce any source of qualitative change to the problem that they critique so emotionally. So watch the movie. It's an enjoyable movie, but be critical of it. Always be critical. So thank you. This is Carlos Garrido from Midwestern Marx, signing up.